What's going on, everybody? This is Lady Luck here again. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys see the title. We're going to be talking about the crash updates for Air India 171. I do have an article that I want to show, as well as Captain Steve has given an update. He has a great YouTube channel, great content. He's also a pilot, so he has a lot of experience in aviation, and he has been providing a lot of great updates on his channel regarding Air India 171 plane crash. As always, my condolences to all of those who lost loved ones in this horrific tragedy. It is nothing that anyone could ever be prepared for. So I wanted to kind of give the latest update on the preliminary report has already come out, and what has been discussed so far is the notion that the fuel injector um, was cut off. So I want to get into that a little bit. First, make sure you guys are hitting the like button, subscribe, and share this content. These are important updates on this horrific incident that I believe people need to know and be aware of. I mean, it also helps you to have just an overall understanding of how these investigations go through this process from start to finish. When there is a plane crash, regardless of where it is, the process is typically the same. The information and the results of the investigation itself can, always vary. But one of the things that they think about is the human error in this. And so, that is one of the things that they touch on in this most recent update. So let's get to the article. Also, if you're enjoying the content, consider becoming a member. Exclusive member live streams that'll be done, as well as exclusive court filings and lawsuits that I go over. I have a strong interest in law, of course, in any level of engineering, air disasters, and as well as true crime. So, I always want to be able to try to learn. I'm learning as well as imparting information, but it's a learning experience for me. And that's something that I'm always appreciative to take the opportunity to learn something new. And above all, this is, affecting lives. People have lost their family, their loved ones, in this crash. So this is something that hopefully um, the victims and the families can, be able to understand from the report and the investigation as to what happened. And they deserve that. So let's get to it. I'm going to pull up the article first. And this is on the MSN website here. I'm not going to read the entire article, but if you guys want to check it out, this article is Air India junior pilot asks captain why he turned off fuel switches. It's the title of the article. It was uh, posted up 2 days ago. And so, just to kind of skim over some of the fundamental information on here, cockpit voice recording of doomed Air India Flight 171 indicates the younger co pilot asked his more experienced colleague, which being that the pilot, while he turned off the plane's fuel supply switches. The info from people who asked not to be identified because they're not authorized to speak publicly reveals for the first time who said what in the flight deck. And this is coming from the black box. There are two components: the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. So the conversation that occurred in the cockpit, of course, between the pilot and the co-pilot is what was captured in the cockpit voice recorder. Um, the exchange was first mentioned in last week's preliminary report from India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, probing the June 12 crash in the western city of Ahmedabad. I want to make sure I'm not messing up the name, so I'm not going to try to keep pronouncing it. But without identifying the speakers, the report had shown two fuel switches in the cockpit were moved to a cut-off position, causing the Boeing Company 787 Dreamliner to lose lift and crash 32 seconds after takeoff. 32 seconds. The other pilot had denied turning off the switches, according to the AAIB, which had extracted data from the cockpit voice recorder. Aviation experts had speculated it was first Officer Clive Kunder who had posed a question to Captain Sumit, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. Given Kunder was the pilot flying and would have had his hands full, one on the yoke, hold on one second, commanding the wide body into the skies, and the other on the throttle, controlling the aircraft's speed. This is the Wall Street Journal previously reported who had said what in the exchange. Um, the initial investigation showed the fuel control switches were turned off immediately after the plane departed. While the move was reversed about 10 seconds later, it was too late to avert the June 12th crash that killed 260 people on board the plane and on the ground. All right, so how and why the switches came to be turned off, cutting the flow of fuel to the engines, are now the key lines of inquiry for the investigators. Officials are probing whether it could be the result of a failure of the plane's systems or human action, deliberate or inadvertent. That is a couple of the things that they do look at when they do look at the human error in this, or the decisions that are being made by the pilots itself. These planes are not, you know, uh, flying themselves. You're talking about having to have, two people behind, the controls here. And when certain things decisions are made, they go through a laundry list of questions. They factor in, whether there was some level of exhaustion, training, development, understanding of the aircraft, if there are some policies and guidelines, perhaps, that they may not have been aware of. I mean, even down to whether or not it was just a simple, well, not simple, but a mistake. And so the two switches sit at the lower end of the aircraft center console between the two pilot seats and near the thrust levers, and they're designed in a way to prevent unintended movement. There are metal guards on either side of the mushroom shaped knobs, and the switches themselves have a spring loaded locking mechanism requiring a pull up motion to change the position. Once moved, the tab at their base locks them in position. So these are the things that they have to factor in. You know, how they're designed to lock into place. Would it even be easy to accidentally knock it out of position? From the last video that I did with the updates, the information that was provided, and of course, we did check out Captain Steve's video. The way it was explained was that it is not designed and installed to be able to be easily manipulated, even with human error. However, there was speculation that it could have been installed incorrectly or upside down. So, of course, if it's not installed correctly, the purpose of what it was designed to do is going to be less effective. You install it upside down. Maybe it was easy to knock it out of position. It's already incorrectly installed. So hopefully there will be more to come out. You guys can feel free to read this information here in the article. The co-pilot, of course, is heard asking the pilot if they knocked it out, and if, like I said, if it's installed incorrectly, there could have been just a simple case of the human error because of the way it was installed. So we're gonna move over to the video with Captain Steve. Make sure you guys please go on Captain Steve's YouTube channel and check out his great content. I enjoy getting a lot of updates on a lot of air disasters and engineering disasters. Him being a pilot, of course, he has his expertise in the field. His YouTube channel, Captain Steve with 3 E's and VE. This video has wow, 1.45 million views as of July 14th. So please make sure you go and check out Captain Steve and show him some love. we're going to tune into this video. It's not long. So I just wanted to kind of hear his thoughts on this and get an update on what he has to say on this. Let's get to it.
Off the fuel control switches. Is there any explanation for that?
Yeah, I think that's the real question, is why were these engine fuel shutoff switches moved to the shutoff position?
So there are still so many questions. Were those switches deliberately moved? Was this maintenance malpractice? Was it premeditated? And if that's the case, why?
All right, our latest video on the Air India 171 crash has well over 3 million views so far and 30,000 plus comments. We've gone into those 30,000 plus comments to come out with your questions. And so we're going to try to get to as many as we can. But let's jump into question number one. Jordan Nash, 7867. Taking from what Steve said, is it possible that the pilot committed it would fit the criteria? You draw your own conclusions on that. The report falls short of that. You can look at the evidence as well as I can, and you can draw your own conclusions. All right, so we've got lost but making good time. The preliminary report states the fuel cutoff levers were deliberately moved to the off position. One pilot asked the other why he had done that, and he replied that he had not. One of the pilots then returned the levers to the run position, but it was too late, too little too late. What could possess one of the pilots to cut off the fuel and then deny it? That's the $1 million question.
Right.
What would possess somebody to do such a thing? The denial part, I totally understand. Right. When I asked my kids something that I caught them in red-handed, they always denied it. That's kind of human nature. But the first part of that, again, yeah, it leaves us with more questions than answers. Travel Bridges 3513. Mm-hmm. Is there anything a co-pilot can realistically do in the split seconds if the other pilot suddenly makes a catastrophic input? Well, the other pilot did. 10 seconds after the fuel control switches were placed to cutoff, I'm assuming the other pilot placed them back to run. That's a lot of presence of mind to work through denial, what happened, what controlling your airplane, and then reaching and doing something that you wouldn't normally do. 10 seconds is pretty quick. It wasn't quick enough, but it was amazing on the part of that other pilot. Mukundan P writes, most importantly, why does the computer allow the actions like cutting off the fuel at such a low altitude during a critical phase of flight? Well, because I may have to cut off fuel to an engine as I'm landing. Let's say I'm at 300 or 400 feet and I get an engine fire on one of my engines. I'm going to want to go ahead and do my procedure and cut that off before I land. So that's why it is. It's never intended to do it on climb out. And
right. And I think that was the question being asked. Critical phase, perhaps when the plane is taking off flight. So maybe the system can be programmed to where certain functions just do not operate during certain phases of the flight. You guys saw that the buttons were separated. It's not like you can just move the lever and it cuts both on at the same time. It literally allows you to do it individually. But I think the question, from what I'm reading in my interpretation of it, is asking, why would the system allow this to happen during a critical phase, primarily dealing with the takeoff phase? You need the fuel to be running through the engines during takeoff. Maybe when you're landing, you can cut them off. But during takeoff, the system should be registering that the plane is taking off, and perhaps the system should have its, it should be designed and programmed to where certain functions like this, it should give you an instant alarm while taking off that the fuel control has been cut off, because that's not the phase of the flight that you need the fuel controls to be cut off. You need it running. So maybe that's something that, the AAIB can take into consideration when it comes down to the, computer programming that does help the pilots to fly the plane. I mean, these planes it has so much advanced technology. There's always a server computer, programming that goes into the monitoring, into recording the data. That's a lot of AI going into that, and programming something in the system to say, trigger alarm if fuel cutoff, fuel control is cut off during takeoff, might be something that can just help, in situations like this. So even if it happens by accident, it's automatic, a loud alarm, something audible, maybe a rudder shake, something, anything that can instantly, get the pilot, co-pilot's attention for them to cut it back on. You're taking off, you need fuel, you know, and this is not the phase of the flight where you should be tampering with these buttons. I think that's more so, and that sounds to me more so what this commenter is asking here. So let's get back to it.
Run signal, even when the cockpit levers are at cutoff.
I go a little bit back. Okay.
See a permanent run signal, even when the cockpit levers are at cutoff. I don't know anything about that. No, I don't think that's a thing, and that's not what the problem was here. The switches were physically placed to cut off, and they operated the way they're designed to cut off fuel. A few seconds later, 10 seconds later, they were placed back to run. But it wasn't enough time to get the engines to light off sufficiently to get enough thrust to stop the descent. My TV channel in my Cessna 172, in a committed emergency hazardous off-field landing, the mixture is set to cut off just before impact, as well as other steps. The question is, what is the procedure for prepping for an imminent crash in this airplane? A mixture thing on a civilian airplane is completely different than cutting off the fuel to the engines on a turbine jet. But yeah, that's a good question. At Snoopy Pie writes, why should we trust Boeing? In the case of the 737 MAX crashes, Lion Air 610, Ethiopian 302, Boeing initially blamed the pilots, even though the true cause was a deeply flawed MCAS system. That deflection wasn't about truth. And then he goes on to talk about this. That's a legitimate question. It's a legit question. And you know what? I think Boeing has had some issues in the past where they need to kind of bump it up. And it is easy to come right straight out and blame the pilots immediately. Let me go back to the preliminary findings here out of.
I think too, they do that because they don't want the liability right away. I mean, I think it's, fair to honestly just say that very plainly. The, airline companies, they come out, or the manufacturer of the planes like Boeing, they come out, and the first thing they want to do is blame anyone else but themselves. They don't want to take accountability because of the liability that comes with it. Think about all these families that are going to be filing lawsuits. If there is evidence and proof that would hold weight in court to show that Boeing bared some level of responsibility on their end, they're going to be named in lawsuits as defendants. So the first thing they want to do is to curb that. And they come out and they immediately blame they don't blame anything else but the pilots. And that is very dangerous, because there have been other cases, other crashes where people were hurt because the airline company came out and blamed the pilots, and it wasn't even the pilot's fault. But the pilots or their families, let's say the pilot, co-pilots, people in the cockpit lost their lives. People will go after their families. I've seen a scenario where it was a plane crash and someone went after the air control technician. They worked in the air control area, and it wasn't their fault per se. It was an oversight, but they still were attacked because one of the fathers of the child that lost their lives, the father went after that individual. I mean, it poses a great threat and danger, to those who are the family members and loved ones of the pilot and co-pilot. They have families as well. This is why you let the investigation take place. The airline company, Boeing, should not say anything about whose fault it is until an investigation proceeds. They don't want to take the blame immediately right away, but they should not do that to anyone else either. So Boeing should learn how to not speak and put blame on the pilot or the co-pilot knowing that those co-pilots and pilots, these people lost their lives as well. They have family members, they have loved ones, and it's going to trigger the victims, the ones that are very angry and upset, to maybe want to do something, and it puts it poses a great harm and danger to them. So Boeing needs to stop being reckless and immediately blaming, human error. That should not be their go-to answer. So, that's basically what it comes down to. They don't want to get sued.
India, there was a lot of agencies, not just Boeing, right? There was Boeing, there was the NTSB, the FAA, the AAIB, the Canadians were involved. A lot of different people were involved in looking at this incident, and they came up with a preliminary finding, which was that both fuel control switches were placed to cutoff right after rotate. There is no procedure on the planet where that is a thing to do. There's only one real explanation for why that happened, and you can draw your own conclusions on that. But again, and Boeing had some issues in the past. I don't think that's germane to this conversation with this particular incident. All right, next is JDog 986. As a Boeing worker who worked on the Air India 787 in production, I wish there was some outreach to those who might be affected when one of our planes go down for any reason. My lead was truly distraught when the planes used to take down the Twin Towers were his planes. You know what, folks, this is a human side of the industry. It's really easy to get cynical and point a finger at Boeing or point a finger at GE, or point a finger at Air India and blame some large corporation. But there are actual people that put those airplanes together, and they put a lot of pride, and they pour themselves into those airplanes. Yeah. And so in this case, let me be very clear about this. That Boeing aircraft was operating exactly the way it was designed to operate. There was no flaw in this aircraft that led to this accident. That's very clear from the preliminary report. This was done by human intervention, plain and simple. So yeah, for the folks at Boeing, my heart goes out to you. I hope that you guys have on board in your HR department a program to reach out and say, hey, I need to talk to somebody about that. If you don't, send us a message here, and I can see if I can connect with you, and let's make that human connection, right?
So that's pretty much the crux of the video, and I just wanted to kind of share that content with you guys so that you guys can just see how, like Captain Steve said, it's easy to shift blame, but people have families, people have loved ones that oftentimes are greatly affected, and we undermine that depending on what side we're looking at it on and the perspective being made here. I say let the investigation complete itself before total blame is placed on anyone. But I mean, in these situations, you expect the families, the victims of the families, the families of the victims that lost their lives, to want to take legal action, and that's standard. And so that should be expected, and it should not be made any worse by Boeing or any other airline company or anyone else just automatically shifting blame. Let the evidence, produce the results that it needs to produce. Let the investigation continue. So far, they are saying that there is human error in this, but it could have been an error. I mean, I don't see how this was a sign of someone wanting to self-harm or anything to that extent. I'm not taking that out of this situation, and I've studied other crashes that did involve the pilot intentionally wanting to self-harm, and they took the entire plane with them. At least two other crashes that I have personally saw the breakdown investigations on, where the pilots intentionally did that. So it's, to me personally, that's just my thoughts, but you guys let me know what you think in the comment section about this. And of course, as always, shout out to Captain Steve. He does a great job. He was taking questions that were sent to him and just answering, the best as possible. I'm going to continue with updates until I guess the investigation has reached some sort of conclusion where we can start speaking on another crash that occurred at SeaWorld. I do want to get into that. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys have a great evening. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the Lady Luck Club. We are growing. I'm posting up updates of the supporters here that are coming in and enjoying the content. And I want to thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. It means so much to me that you are taking time. Of 1 billion users on YouTube, you do want to hang out here in the LLC and enjoy the content. So until the next one, you guys continue to take care of yourselves and each other. Lady, look out. Deuces.